Today we're diving into an absolutely fascinating story. It's about how the English language, once the tool of an empire, was completely flipped on its head and transformed by Indian writers into this powerful, vibrant voice for a brand new nation. It's an incredible journey of reclamation.
And that really brings us to the big question, right? How on earth does a language that was imposed on a country during colonial rule become one of the world's most exciting literary traditions? How did it become the language used to express a uniquely Indian identity? Well, let's find out.
So, our story really kicks off with this amazing paradox. You've got the English language, introduced by the British way back in the 19th century, but here's the twist. That very same language would eventually be used to champion the ideals of Indian nationalism and freedom.
Okay, so before we go any farther, let's just get our terms straight. When we talk about Indian writing in English, or IWE for short, we're not just talking about books written in English by people from India. No, it's a whole literary tradition. It's where Indian authors take English and make it their own, They infuse it with local rhythms and words to explore everything from ancient philosophy to modern-day social problems, all through a distinctly Indian lens. And you can really see how this all unfolded over time. It starts off in the 19th century as a colonial import, but fast forward to the early 20th century and boom, it's already being used as a powerful tool for the independence movement. And then after 1947, once freedom is won, the floodgates just open. The literature absolutely explodes with new themes, tackling the tough realities of partition, freedom, and what it means to build a modern identity.
So, who were the people who started all this? Let's talk about the pioneers. These were the trailblazers, the brilliant thinkers, who first picked up the English language and used it to say something truly profound about India's soul to the entire world.
And right at the beginning, you can kind of see two major paths forming, represented by two incredible figures. On one side, you have Sri Aurobindo, who was all about that inward spiritual journey. And on the other, you have Rabindranath Tagore, who was looking outwards, trying to connect with all of humanity.
Sri Aurobindo was a real powerhouse, a true philosopher-poet. He took these incredibly deep, complex ideas from ancient Indian philosophy and did something amazing. He expressed them in beautiful English prose and epic poetry. He literally made English a language that could carry the weight of Indian spirituality.
And then, 1913. This year is a huge deal, a total game changer. This is the moment Indian writing in English doesn't just knock on the world's door, it kicks it wide open. Why? Because this was the year Rabindranath Tagore won the Nobel Prize in Literature for his work, Gitanjali.
And Tagore? Wow, he was so much more than just a writer. The man was a force of nature, a philosopher, a composer, a humanist. Through works like Gitanjali, he somehow managed to capture the very feeling of Indian culture and communicate it to a global audience, connecting it to these big, universal ideas of love, freedom, and spirituality that everyone could understand. But okay, the story doesn't end with these grand philosophical ideas, not by a long shot. The next major shift was a turn away from the abstract and a dive right into the messy, concrete, and beautiful reality of everyday Indian life. And this was absolutely crucial. Suddenly, the focus wasn't on gods or big national movements anymore. The lens zoomed right in. Writers started using English to tell the stories of farmers, of untouchables, of middle-class families. This really marks the birth of social realism in Indian literature. And when you talk about social realism, you have to talk about these two giants. On one side, you have R.K. Narayan. He created the charming, fictional town of Malgudi to explore the gentle ironies and quirks of middle-class life. On the other side, you have Mulk Raj Anand, who used his writing like a weapon to fight social injustice, focusing his stories on the lives of the most oppressed people in society.
And they were not alone. Writers like K.S. Venkataramani were weaving Gandhian ideals into their stories about village life. Meanwhile, Bhabani Bhattacharya wrote these absolutely unflinching novels about famine and poverty. Together, they all helped build this powerful tradition of social commentary.
So the picture is getting bigger, right? But there's another piece of the puzzle that is so vital. We start to see the emergence of these powerful female writers who brought brand new perspectives and themes to the forefront.
Just listen to that quote. That captures the spirit of Sarojini Naidu, who was known as the Nightingale of India. And for good reason. She was a poet and a major figure in the freedom struggle, and her work was just so lyrical and passionate. It celebrated Indian landscapes, culture, and emotion with this musical quality that was completely her own. And she really paved the way.
After her, a new generation of women writers started tackling even more complex stuff. You had Kamala Markandaya, who was just brilliant at exploring the clash between old traditions and modern pressures, especially through the eyes of her female characters. And then there's Nayantara Sahgal, who brought this sharp, feminist, and very political edge to her work, examining the search for identity against the backdrop of post-independence politics.
So as we start to wrap this up, let's take a step back. What's the lasting impact of this incredible literary journey? What did all of these writers ultimately build?
Well, it really boils down to three huge things. First, it gave India a powerful, authentic voice on the world stage. Second, it created this rich cultural conversation between the East and the West. And third, it became a foundational pillar of what we now call post-colonial literature. That's a massive legacy.
I mean, these writers laid an incredible foundation. They took a colonial language and turned it into a vehicle for freedom, for identity, and for art. And that just leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. Building on this incredible legacy, what stories are India's writers telling the world today?